Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. We're really excited for today's event. We are going to connect live from Svalbard, and we're going to get to spend a little bit of time with the women of Hearts in the Ice. So just to give you a little bit of background, Sunniva Sorby and her expedition partner, Hilde Strom, have been in Svalbard for over a month, living in the remote trapper's cabin, Bamsebu. In total, they will spend 9 months there, becoming the first women to do so solo, so overwintering for 9 months. Along the way, they'll be taking part in all kinds of different citizen science projects, and each month we're connecting with them for these live events with different polar experts from around the world. So a ton of fun. So right before we say hi to Hilde and Sunniva, they sent me a little video from the cabin. We're able to connect with them via satellite phone, but we just can't get strong enough signal for video. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get that little greeting, and then we're going to talk to them for a little moment. So you should see my screen now. I'm going to go full screen and hit play.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining our call today on polar bears. We're really excited to chat with all of you live from Bamsebu.
Hei alle sammen, så hyggelig at dere med på timen vår om isbjørn. Veldig spennende for oss å være med fra Bamsebu.
It's going to be an exciting call with an exciting topic because we've had lots of polar bear visits here.
Vi har hatt mye isbjørnbesøk, og vi har noen flinke eksperter, så dette blir spennende.
Talk to you soon.
Ses snart.
All right, very cool. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, it's so awesome to have you joining us live today. We'd love to hear a little bit about the both of you and what you've been up to.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joe, and thanks to everybody on the call, including Ian. Really appreciate it. That language, for those of you who don't know, is Hilde. It's quite fun at Bamsebu. We're multilingual here with a little smattering of Norwegian and English, and we are up in Hilde's home turf. And I came out here all the way from Canada, and we've been here over 70 days now. And we just came back from a snowmobile ride. We didn't see any fresh polar bear tracks, but in the last couple of weeks we have had some visitors. And it's been, gets the heart rate going. It also just puts us on high alert. We have deep respect for these beautiful marine mammals. And you'll hear soon from Ian to share a little bit more about them. But I'm going to pass you over to Hilde right now.
Yeah, hi guys. So this is, we are Hearts in the Ice, and we are in a very remote cabin called Bamsebu. It's 140 kilometers away from the next neighbor. And we are chopping wood, we are finding driftwood to chop more wood to keep us warm. We have a windmill here and a solar panel, and the hut is only 20 square meters. That's, I guess, the size of your kitchen back home. So it's really small, and we have everything we need for, the next 7 months to come. So, and we probably won't see anyone until April maybe, when they can come visiting us, driving over the frozen fjords and come down here with a snowmobile.
And we've been in touch with people, obviously, via satellite phone, and we did chat with a friend of Hilde's yesterday, and there was a polar bear, sadly, that came into a place called Hornsjön. And Hilde, how many kilometers from here, roughly?
150 kilometers from here.
150 kilometers from where we are, and sadly the polar bear got one of their dogs. And so we have a dog, Petra, with us, and you can bet that we are a little nervous. She sleeps outside, and so we're just trying to be as vigilant and safe as we can be. But it's just the nature of where we're living, so far away from anything.
All right. Well, you have some pretty incredible neighbors, Hilde and Sunniva. I can only imagine what it's like when they come for a visit or they're around the cabin. Before we meet Ian, I mentioned in the intro that you guys are working on all kinds of amazing citizen science projects. Do you want to share a couple of them with us, and then we'll jump over and we'll talk with Ian for a little bit?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joe. We're very fortunate to be aligned with really stellar organizations like the Norwegian Polar Institute, BCIT in Vancouver, UNIS, and NASA, what we're doing, and Scripps Institute of Oceanography in California, and what we're doing is all sorts of things. We're collecting saltwater samples, which are really challenging right now because the ice and slush are coming in, collecting phytoplankton. We are taking aurora observations for NASA, and we've just been asked like last week, to be rocket citizen scientists. So we're going to be doing time-lapse photos of a rocket that's being launched from Andøya and from Longyearbyen probably tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. They're launching some chemicals in the air that simulate aurora for testing various things. We're also, marine, like mammal wildlife observation. That's a very big part of what we're doing, from reindeer to fox to seals to polar bears. We're going to be collecting ice core samples as well and taking observations on the actual thickness of the ice. And we also have a drone, so we're doing infrared sensing. And so BCIT will collaborate. They're already collaborating with the Norwegian Polar Institute and Scripps, because with those three, with the drone and what's underwater and what's on land, they're able to collaborate on the information they get and paint a much bigger picture of what's happening as it relates to climate change in this specific area and in Svalbard as a whole. So it's really exciting for us to call ourselves citizen scientists. It's making everything that we're doing here very relevant and very pressing as an issue, because I know it's on everybody's mind. We both know it's on everybody's mind today.
Absolutely. Well, it's awesome to have you joining us. You're doing amazing citizen science projects, which is really cool. But now we're going to turn things over and we're going to meet Ian. So Ian Stirling, he's studied polar bears throughout the Canadian Arctic for 37 years with the Canadian Wildlife Service. His long-term studies of polar bears in Western Hudson Bay, one of the world's most southerly populations, confirm the negative effects of climate change. He's also studied bears in the southern Beaufort Sea, as well as the Canadian high Arctic for several decades. So Ian, it's so awesome to have you joining us live today. We're excited to get to know you and your work a little better. Oops.
Really, I really like to have the opportunity to talk to kids. I was a kid once myself, and it's great to be able to talk to people who are interested in from other parts of the world and interested in the North.
All right, very cool, Ian. Well, I know you have a little presentation to share with us. So when you're ready, if you want to share screen, we'll get things going.
Okay. So I think we're there. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's just loading up. And then if you go back to the slideshow, yeah, hit from the beginning, we're good to go.
From the beginning, I'm just looking for that so that I can, oh yeah, there we are. Okay, is that up there now?
Perfect. Looks good.
Okay, what I'm going to do is just take a quick run through a number of things about polar bears. A picture like this is probably taken not too far from where you are in Svalbard, and you have a piece of big old multi-year ice with a female and a couple of cubs walking by. Polar bears are not everywhere in the Arctic. They're mostly around the coastal areas where you see purple. The middle of the Arctic Ocean is too deep and too biologically unproductive. There are many different groups of polar bears. There's not just one population. There's actually about 19 different subpopulations. You can see up near the top of the Arctic Ocean, you see where it says Barents Sea. And that's, I don't know if you, can you see the cursor there, Joe? I put my cursor on Barents Sea, but I don't know if you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, it's showing up.
Okay, there's this little group of islands right in here. That's where Sunniva and the Arctic students, that's where Svalbard is. So that's pretty well up there. Now, something that a lot of people don't know is that polar bears and grizzly bears are very closely related and they can interbreed. And what you're looking at here is in a zoo in Germany, and that's a grizzly bear, a brown bear in the background, and that's her son, which is half polar bear. So they're very recently evolved from each other, but they can interbreed. The male polar bears are very big. They're 400 to 600 kilos average, 1,000 or 1,200 pounds, and they live about 27, 28 years. The mothers first start having cubs when they're 4 or 5 years old, and continue to have cubs until they're sometimes as old as 28 or 30. Now this is all kind of thing that photographers like to be able to take pictures of, but what you're really looking at here is conserving energy, because the most important thing of all for polar bears is to conserve energy, because they never know when they're going to get it, and so they carry the fat around on their body, sort of like their money full of pocket full of money they've saved. That bear is jumping between the flows because it costs it less energy to jump than actually swim and then climb out. Some people ask me how smart are polar bears. Just to give you a quick idea, and this is in a zoo in Japan, and they hung a piece of meat up top, thinking that would keep the bear entertained and thinking about things. Well, the bear had other ideas. First, it went and got a big yellow piece of plastic, learned how to throw it like a basketball, and knocked the meat off. And then it figured out it was faster to just pick up a pole and knock it off. And this is really quite remarkable, because tool using has often been thought mainly to be something that smart animals like monkeys could do, but polar bears can do it too. They fight with each other. You can see on this left-hand picture, you can see one tooth is broken right off. That's because when they're fighting over breeding females, they sometimes lock their jaws and then push against each other's mouths. One of the things that you can use to identify a male from a female at the distance is that the males often have big amounts of hair growing out the back of their leg, and the females don't have that. So when it's time to be looking for a breeding female in the springtime, the bears walk along with their nose to the ground, looking for the smell of little glands that the females have in the base of their feet. They leave little smells in the snow that the bears can detect. They might even see them up there where our Norwegian friends are camped. Then when the bear finds a female, they hang around together for a while until they get used to each other, because females normally are very afraid of adult males, because the males are liable to kill their cubs to eat them. But this female has gotten used to the male being around, and here's another female, and when she mated the following end of the summer, she was very, very fat. She was so fat we couldn't put a radio on her neck, so we glued a little radio on her head so we could find her den, and she had triplets. But when they go into the snow den like this, they stay in there for several months, and the cubs are only about 1.5 pounds in weight when they're first born, and they're almost hairless. Their eyes are closed, and it takes 2 or 3 months before they get up to the size that they are here, and they're finally ready to be able to handle the cold and go outside. And here's a mother, and this is actually in Svalbard, not too far away from where Sunniva and her classes are. And this bear is just leaving the denning area in the springtime at the end of March. You can see she's kind of skinny, and you can see her shoulder blades, and you can see her 2 tiny little cubs getting ready to follow her out on the sea ice, where she's going to be a super predator. And she eats many different kinds of things. There's one up here in the top left-hand corner. It's called a ring seal. That's most, and there's one right beside it. There's another ring seal. You can see an adult that's partly eaten. You can see the rings on the skin. The bears mainly eat the fat and sometimes some of the skin. They leave the rest of it away, but they may eat a number of other things, like, given an opportunity, a young walrus, or maybe a beluga whale, or down here on the bottom, a bearded seal. But the young ring seals are the main ones that they like to eat, and they're very nervous when they're out on the ice, because they know that those predators are out there, so they never lie down and just go to sleep. They're always raising their head and looking around to see if they can see a bear. Here's a couple of different ways they hunt. Down at the bottom, there's a bear lying by a hole in the ice, waiting for a seal to come up and breathe. And the one up in the top is dug down through some snow into where there's a breathing hole in the ice. Because what happens is the ice freezes in the winter up here in this top plate. You can see cracks in the ice, and it's quite thin. Then down here in the middle, you have the seals want to stay in this area underneath the ice where it's frozen solid. So they have to keep their own breathing holes open, but they have to keep 5 or 6 alternatives, because if a bear finds the one that they're breathing at and they only had one, well, of course, they're going to be lunch. And then later on, and there's a big snow drift that forms over these holes. The female comes up and digs a little snow cave, and inside she gives birth to her pup. Of course, the bears are walking around in the springtime like this mother up top, and she could tell by smell that they're down here underneath, just in front of her, there's a ringed seal birth lair, and there's a pup in there, and she's waiting for the mother to come back or something to happen. And then you can see down here, she suddenly, on the bottom right-hand side, she's received a smell or heard a sound. She stands up, she pounds with her feet, and then dives right down into the birth lair down under the ice to try and get the ringed seal pup. Then out on the ice, this is a young bearded seal, and they have very thick skin. You can see the bear just basically peels the skin back, eats all of the fat, and it's just leaving most of the meat on the ice. And you can see that bear has been pretty successful hunting, looks pretty fat. One of the things with climate warming, and if you look at just a ice map of the area, all through the winter the ice is frozen. Then in the summertime, there's a fasting period in Western Hudson Bay or in Svalbard. All the ice melts around the island, and some of the bears have to come ashore and live on their stored fat reserves. And with climate warming, that period of time is getting longer, and that makes it very hard for them because they can't eat as much. So we find that the breakup is occurring earlier, and it's shortening their best feeding time. And one of the things we're seeing in Western Hudson Bay and in Svalbard as well is that if the breakup gets earlier and earlier, the bears have less time to feed in their most important time, when those ringed seal pups are around, and they're getting lighter and lighter. And we find, this is just a graph, I'll say quickly, this shows you that over the last 30 years, polar bears in Western Hudson Bay on average have been losing weight. There's a lot of fluctuation there because there's a lot of annual variation between years. But this also tells you why you need long-term studies for things like climate change or global climate measurements of any kind, or studies of animals like polar bears, because if you only studied something here for any 3 or 10-year gap, you wouldn't get a significant result. The bottom line, the red one at the bottom, shows that that's the heaviest or the lightest female polar bear we ever caught that had a cub the following year. The concern is this declining line is starting to get down to that level. This one just basically is a model of how we have lost sea ice. The short version is, if you look at, there's a number of different lines in there. They're all descending. They're all going down, and they're saying that by 2050 or the turn of the century, there's going to be very little ice left. The really dramatic thing is the decline in the red line, because those are measurements taken actually off of the satellite photos. 1979 was the first year that we had satellite photos for the whole of the Arctic. And what the satellite photos tell us is that we're losing ice in the Arctic faster than even the most bad news model. And this is going to illustrate some of the ideas, some of the things that may happen. Remember that our people in Svalbard are up here on this set of islands right on the edge. This is how much ice was in the Arctic at the minimum time in September in the year 2000. That's how much there's going to be in another 20 years or so, according to the models, excuse me. So quite a change from that to that. That's what we're living with. And there's that means that some of these bears are skinny. The females are getting nervous because the males are starting to eat a few more cubs. That's not very nice. On Svalbard, this is pictures taken not very far from where the Sunny and her class are up in Svalbard. These are barnacle geese, and the polar bears are walking through eating the eggs and the young chicks. The bears are having to swim more because there's more open water, and it costs them about 5 times as much energy to swim a distance as it does just to walk. And here's what habitat should look like for those ringed seal birth lairs. Lots of heavy snow, wind blown, very strong. You can see there's a big thick lair of snow over a birth layer here, and you can see that that provides quite a bit of protection for the ring seals and their cubs when it's going to have a visitor to the birth layer like this. And that big snow layer is very important because it slows the female down, or the hunting bear down, gives the cubs a chance to escape. Now we're seeing, here's in Svalbard, a warm spring, it's making the roof to those layers collapse. So these pups are being stranded out on the ice, and the bears are able to come along and catch them and kill them before they get fat. You see that fat mother wants to turn its cub into a little fat cub. Here's what happened after a rainstorm in Baffin Island. It just simply washed the protection away, and there were two big bays where it rained in late April when it should have been 20 below. There wasn't. And 2 days after that, every seal pup in the area had been killed by foxes, polar bears. And this also happens with polar bear dens sometimes. This is on the northern Yukon coast where there was warm weather and probably some rain. The den collapsed on top of the female. It was too heavy. She couldn't move. She and her cubs all died. One of the things that is around a little bit that some of the bears can eat, this is pictures taken in Svalbard as well, a dead whale. The bears can scavenge on whales. That can provide them some things to eat, but nothing really replaces sea ice and the ability to hunt seals. Here's the skeleton of that a couple of years later of that whale you just saw. The females and cubs, you see how skinny they are? That's because they're spending time on Svalbard trying to live on their stored fat. You can see, just as a conversion, there's a diagram of a bowhead whale, and what that scale is telling you is that one bowhead whale has the amount of fat on it of 1,400 ring seals. 1,400, that's quite a lot, because the average polar bear needs about 43 seals a year. So whale fat is potentially a huge resource for them. You can see here in Wrangell Island in Alaska, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a clump of bears, and they're standing over a dead bowhead whale. And up above, there's all kinds. There were over 200 polar bears that had come in, or they'd been stranded on land and they were hungry and looking for something to eat. They were coming and waiting a turn to feed on a bowhead carcass. Now, I just quickly, I won't go through this list. I just want to make the point that anybody who's doing any kind of cooperative work in a place like the Arctic works with a lot of people, a lot of different organizations support them. Sunny went through a whole list of different projects and things they were involved in. That's because the Arctic, to get anything done, has a lot of networking. We don't know what the future will be. Well, thank you very much for listening. I'll follow what Joe wants to do next. And if you'd like to ask some questions, that's just fine.
All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for sharing that presentation with us today. Looks like you've had an incredible career and some beautiful places and getting to work with some pretty incredible animals. And you've really done an amazing job of documenting really the plight that polar bears and many other animals in the Arctic are facing with declining sea ice. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
You're welcome.
So Sunniva and Hilde, I have a picture that you sent me as well of the polar bear tracks. Would you like me to pop that up? You can talk about that for a moment.
Should
yes, please, and also some alternative food for the polar bears would be good to mention.
Okay, so let me pop
up. So yeah, perfect. Pop up.
Okay, so the image is up now.
And also, perfect. Thank you. So this was the big male that came by. We had 2 polar bear visits to close to the hut, and the younger one, Sunniva, actually ran into the young one. That really ran away and was easy to scare. But the other one we didn't actually see. It's a huge polar bear, and I think that this polar bear with the tracks that you are seeing is maybe more than 600 kilos, which is a huge polar bear. And Ian, we actually have seen lately at Svalbard that the polar bears are starting to kill reindeers. And me and Sunniva just walked into to a polar bear 2 weeks ago that was that just had killed the reindeer and was eating on the carcass, and it ran away when we came, and we didn't see that it was a reindeer until we were really close. So that was a fresh killed reindeer killed by a polar bear. So could that be a way?
No, the reindeer don't have very much fat on them. Killing a reindeer is quite unusual. Most of the ones that they feed on are scavenged, and that's because they're just hungry and they'll eat anything they get a chance to. But there's almost no nutrition for a polar bear. Polar bears they're big because they live on fat. Now they get the fat from marine mammals, so they're not going to be able to adapt to life on land.
All right. Well, we just lost the satellite connection, so hopefully Sunniva and Hilde can join us shortly. But let's start meeting some of our classrooms for some questions, Ian. So we have classrooms tuning in via YouTube as well. So I want to give a shout out to a few groups. We've got grade 6s at Hilson Avenue in Ottawa. We've got grade 3 and 4s hanging out with us in Toronto. We've got Sunniva's sister hanging out with us today. That's pretty cool. She's sending warm hugs. We've got Virginia Beach. We've got Mrs. Gary's second graders in Woodbury, Minnesota. Halton Hill, some grade 4s hanging out with Mr. Hancock. Let's see, Thunder Bay, class in Thunder Bay hanging out with us at Our Lady of Charity. So lots of cool students hanging out with us all over the place, Ian. But we're going to go to one of our live classrooms to start. We're going to start with Mrs. Rickard's group. They're third graders hanging out with us in Tucson, Arizona. Let's get that microphone turned on. There it is. How we doing, Tucson?
How are we doing, everybody?
We're back.
Okay, so I'm just hearing now that Sunniva and Hilde are back as well. So if your question is about polar bears for Ian, just let us know. Or if you want to ask Sunniva and Hilde some questions about life in the cabin and what they're up to, you can do that as well. So it's totally up to the class which question they want to ask.
Grace, you have a question, Grace? Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Look it that way and say it nice and loud.
Why would they eat their cubs?
Please say that again.
Why would they eat their cubs?
Oh, well, they're just hungry, and it's easy to catch cubs sometimes, and their mothers know that they're liable to do that, so they avoid them. It doesn't happen very often, but it's a risk that's there quite a bit of the time, and they are simply being lazy and trying to get an easy meal.
And so, Ian, just to confirm, it's generally the males, and those males probably aren't the father of those cubs?
Almost certainly not the father, and some people have suggested they're killing the cubs because they want to breed the female and have the female be the mother of their cubs. But that's not the case with polar bears. It is with lions and sometimes with grizzly bears, but not with polar bears.
Okay, all right, Tucson, Arizona. Thanks for the question to get us started. We're gonna go with some fifth graders hanging out with us in Jonesville, Virginia. Let me get their microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, Virginia?
Good. The question is, what can we do to help? Like, yeah, what can we do to help?
Well, the best thing is, unfortunately, we're in a series of long-term problems related to climate warming. So the most long-term help we can do is encourage governments, companies, our parents, ourselves, not to waste energy and to be efficient. Then the other thing that we can do that helps is simply continue some of our long-term studies, which are telling us a lot about polar bears and their life in the Arctic. And like I showed you with that graph, there's a lot of fluctuation between years. So if you want to really understand things that are going on in a place like the Arctic, you have to be able to support that research over the long term. So the biggest thing that you can do as an individual, and I do.
Can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, I was just gonna say
Can
the
you hear
biggest
us?
thing.
Yeah, Sunniva, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can. Sunniva, any luck hearing us? Okay. Well, unfortunately, it sounds like they can't hear us, but we can hear them. Hopefully, they can sort it out in a second. But Ian, if you want to wrap up that thought, and then we'll jump to another question.
I was going to say the simplest single thing that we can all do, and I do, is as little energy as we can, turn out lights when we don't need them, ride a bike to grocery store to buy a loaf of bread rather than drive a car, that kind of thing.
All right. So we're going to jump to another classroom here. We're going to go to a YouTube question. Let's see. We have a question here, Ian, about the average lifespan of a polar bear. So our group in, where are they? Toronto, our grade 3-4s are wondering about that.
Okay, well, the adult males will live usually a maximum of 25 years for most, occasional ones to 26 or 27. Females will live to 29 or 30, and the maximum, the oldest one I ever aged was 32 in the wild.
All right. Let's go another one of our live classrooms. We're going to go to Thunder Bay, Ontario this time. Grade 6s hanging out. Let me get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 6s? Okay. Thunder Bay, for whatever reason, your microphone doesn't seem to be cooperating with us right now. Try unmuting it on your end and see if that works for us. Okay, maybe it looks like you might be trying to write your question for us, which would be perfect. Sometimes you can also turn the microphone on by the little menu next to the mute under select a microphone. But if you write down that question for us, that'll work too. While we do wait for that question to pop up, I'm going to keep my eye out for it. Mrs. Jenko's group is joining us, and I see someone nice in front and center. Your microphone's on. How are you doing?
Okay, my question is, how do polar bears communicate?
Well, that's a good question. They mostly sort of growl and snort at each other a little bit if they're come very close together. But most of the time they're by themselves, except for mothers and cubs. They spend all their time alone. So they communicate by leaving, the females communicate with the males by leaving a scent in the snow from little glands that are in between their toes. And then the mothers just like our mothers, make it clear. They go "Rawr" at their cubs if they're misbehaving themselves, and the cubs themselves make a yelping sort of a call like that. Other than that, polar bears make almost no communications with voice, but they signal each other when they're close by their body language, if you like, if they are looking threatening or standing up and so on.
All right, good question. So we're going to swing back to Thunder Bay. I know they had a second computer. I think they just loaded it up for us, so we might be able to hear them now.
Oh, we are muted now.
No, we gotcha.
Hi, okay, good.
What do you think is the most intriguing experience you have had in Svalbard?
The most serious incident with a polar bear, do you mean? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, most of the studies that I've done in Svalbard have been working from ships. So then we would I worked as a naturalist and a guide there. And one time I was leading a walk with a bunch of people, and we walked over a little ridge. There was a polar bear on the other side of the ridge walking toward us. And so basically we didn't have any real problem. We just got out of the bear's way. And the same with black bears in Canada or grizzly bears. When you run into a bear, you just see what the bear itself looks like it wants to do and just get out of its way.
All right.
Hey, Joe, we're back.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, and if you don't mind, I just wanted to make a comment about the great question from Virginia about what can we do to help, and just on the heels of what Ian talked about.
Go for it.
Okay, so great question, and I can speak for both Hilde and I, because what we're doing, we asked ourselves the same question. So and I think it's important for everyone to keep asking the questions and to stay passionately curious. And as Ian mentioned, try to get engaged, with politicians and really understand what's happening in your neighborhood, in your backyard. And you could all of you on the phone could be citizen scientists like Hilde and I. There are lots of different programs out there like the NASA Global Observer, something called iBird, Aurorasaurus. So you could just look for more of these, but I think all of us that are not actual scientists can actually become citizen scientists and become really powerful voices of reason and facts to lend our voice to the scientists and create a much bigger picture of what's happening. So I just wanted to share that because that's really what Hilde and I are doing up here until May.
All right. Well, Sunniva, I did want to let you know that your sister Bettina is joining in. So she's watching right now via YouTube, sending warm hugs. And then, so right when I told her that, we lost them. So hopefully she heard me. But let's continue on with our live questions. So let's go now to another classroom. We haven't visited Burlington, Ontario. We've got some grade 6s hanging out with us. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing, Burlington? All right, who's got a polar bear question?
How frequently do polar bears eat seals?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand that.
How frequently do polar bears eat seals?
Oh, that's a really good question because they don't. It's not like it's the same all year round because in the very best hunting time, which is in from April to about July, they might catch a seal every 3 to 5 days. Whereas in the wintertime, they might not catch more than one every month. And that's really important because they store up all of that fat, and they get the bears get about 2/3 of the fat and energy that they'll need for the whole year. They get in that spring period, and that's why the climate is affecting them so much, because it's making the ice melt earlier, and it's taking their dinner away from them before they're finished. But 3 to 5 days per kill at the very best time of the year is about how often they catch them.
All right, another good question.
Very good.
Montreal, Quebec this time. We've got some students hanging out at Trafalgar School. How are we doing, Montreal?
Okay.
Trafalgar.
Hi, we were wondering what your day-to-day life is
Like or
when you're up north in the Arctic. Yeah.
Well, it varies a little bit with what kind of a project you're on, but that's a very good question. Usually when we're doing work in the field, we're up early, 6 o'clock or 6:30, and then we're out either in a helicopter or maybe to catch some bears and put some tags and radio collars out. Another study that I was on was just observing undisturbed polar bears. In other words, letting the bears tell us what their life is all about. And we would be camped in a little wee cabin on the top of a cliff, 100 miles from anywhere that there was anybody. And we would work 24 hours a day, usually with 3 people in the camp. And we would just continue to watch bears 24 hours a day, because in the springtime, you have 24-hour daylight. So basically, they're long days. If you get bad weather, you're grounded, you can't fly, you can't see any bears, you can't do anything. So then we work on our data, we analyze data, we check out our field notes, and if there's any equipment that needs to be fixed, that's when we fix it. Good question.
All right, and I know Hilde and Sunniva are back in. If you guys want to talk a little bit about your day-to-day life as well.
Sure, I'll just start us off, and I want to say, Spam Successes Ali, yay Trafalgar. Thank you for being on the call, and thanks for the question. I'll start off, this is Sunniva. Our day starts somewhere around 8 a.m. and ends around midnight, 1 a.m. So we have long days. We melt snow and ice for water. It takes a while for us to cook our meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We heat the stove. So our wood-burning stove. We take care of Ekra, make sure she's fed and get some exercise. We exercise. We've got a little routine in here, and we're actually practicing for the synchronized stretching Olympics. We think that's coming soon. We do our remote citizen science projects. That keeps us really busy. Staying in touch with emails, with family, friends, our science partners. Taking photos, shooting video for the documentary we're working on, reading, writing, and then also aurora observations. One of the things that keeps us up late at night, which we don't mind at all, is just time-lapse photography of the aurora. And we have something special here called a cusp aurora, which happens at noon. And Hilde, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, it's just completely pitch black. It's now it's no difference between day and night, so it's absolutely dark outside. The only light that we have is the northern lights and the moon, and we have a torch. We have a great torch,
which is a headlamp in English. And I just want Hilde to mention briefly what we did today about the boats, because that's part of our day is struggling with the ice that's moving, and we have a lot of slush ice and a lot of ice that's moved in, which is frozen in our drag fortaining, our safety line to a buoy which connects our boat, which is on shore, and that's what we need to get out in the water to do, collect our salt water and phytoplankton. So we're always, on, like, weather is sort of dictating everything we do here, but our daily routine and rhythm is, it's quite active and quite busy, and we try to have a lot of fun and humor mixed in there because we're in a small space and it's just the two of us and Etra.
And we need to watch out for polar bears any step we take, around any corner, behind every stone or rock or snowdrift.
All right.
Thanks.
Another question.
That's kind of our day.
All right. Another question. Sounds like some exciting days, and sounds like you're keeping busy. I hope that Olympic dream comes to fruition, the stretching Olympics. So we have a classroom online wondering a little bit more about your temperature. What's the coldest it's been, and how cold are you expecting it to get?
Yeah, today it's minus 15, and it's supposed to be minus 20 this week. We expect maybe 30 during our stay. But if you get like 20, 25 minus and a lot of wind, that's really cold.
All right. So while we have a good connection, is there a classroom out there? Give me a wave if you have a question for Hilde and Sunniva, and I'll go right to your classroom. So Mrs. Rickard's group, let me turn that microphone on. And then nice and loud, let's hear your question.
They already answered that question.
No, I'm like, do they live with their parents?
Oh, okay. Yes, we do have a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nice and loud.
How long do the polar bears live with their mom and dad?
Okay, so that might be a good question for Ian. They're wondering about the polar bears living with their mom and dad, or with their mom. How long?
Yeah, they only live with their mom. Their dad doesn't help look after them at all. And they normally stay with them 2.5 years. And that means that the mother takes them through the life cycle and how they, where they should go in the area that they live in at all times of the year. And they go through that cycle a couple of times, teach them how to make a living on their own. And then when they're 2.5 years old, they're booted out and they're on their own. And they have to use that information now on their own to survive.
All right, swinging back to our class in Montreal, they have a question for Sunniva.
Sunniva, can you share what your experience was when you saw your very first polar bear recently?
Yes, I can. It's something I will never forget, oddly enough. It was midnight. I went outside, and typically when we go outside, it's either to go to the bathroom or to look at the lights or to close the window shutters, which are wooden, and they're about maybe 5 inches thick with nail spikes on the outside, so the bears can't get in. And I went outside to close the shutters and actually turn off our satellite unit. And as I walked outside, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, as I walked outside, I took some steps back to turn the light on. Just, I don't know why I did it, because
Uh-oh. possibly just lost them. Yeah. Okay, bummer. So hopefully they can come back and finish that story. Let's give them a chance, and let's go to Mrs. Ide's class in Burlington and see if they have one more polar bear question.
We have a question for you, and that is, what are the polar bear predators?
Well, the main predator of polar bears is humans, but in the natural world, the about the only thing that will kill a polar bear is a male polar bear. Will kill a smaller one, and then the smaller ones don't kill anything else. But most of the polar bears that are killed by humans in hunting activities.
All right. Give me a wave in your classroom if you have another polar bear question. Yeah, Ms. Jenko's group, your microphone is on.
Is there any plastic in the Arctic? Also, how many polar bears are there in the world?
Well, those are both really relevant questions. No one can tell you exactly how many polar bears there are in the world, because there are some areas that we don't have information on, that we can only guess. But we think there's probably about 25,000 polar bears left at the moment, which is a good number if we can save some of the habitat. The other question about plastics is, yes, there are lots and lots of plastics in the Arctic, and they're turning up in the diet of just about everything. And there was just a study done just recently in Alaska, where they found all kinds of pieces of plastic in the stomach of some bears that were killed by hunters. So yes, it's a worldwide problem, and it's in the environment all around us now, and it's one of several different big issues that we really need to address on a worldwide basis. So thank you. That's a very good question.
All right, Thunder Bay, your microphone's on.
We are learning about adaptation. We are learning about adaptation. Have the polar bears' bodies changed in any way to help them adapt to their changing environment?
That's a very good question. And yes, there's a number of very significant things. One of them, of course, is that the bear is white, and that gets its camouflage when it's trying to hunt seals or hunt anything else. If it was a dark bear like a grizzly bear, the seals would see them far away and escape right away. Their heads also, if you think of a grizzly bear, they have a big stocky front to their face and a high forehead. Polar bears have longer, thinner, more pointed heads and longer necks, probably for diving. When they break the snow on layers or breathing holes, they can poke their head down further, faster into the hole and try and catch a seal because of that pointed nature of the head. Their cheek teeth are flat in a grizzly bear because they eat vegetation and they grind it up like a cow. But polar bears eat the fat and tear the seals apart, and so their cheek teeth are very sharp and like scissors. Then they have very short, very sharp toenails, which enable them to walk on ice and grip a little bit better compared to the big, long, soft toenails that black bears or grizzly bears have, which are more adapted for digging in dirt. The polar bears are also that white color. The hair itself is not actually white. It's sort of translucent, and the way it processes light from the sun makes it appear white, and the skin is black. So when heat makes it through from the sun to the bear, it's just like if you were wearing a black coat or a black sweater on a hot day, you'll be hotter than if you're wearing a white one. That's a very good question.
All right, and Ms. Nicodem's group, one more question for us before we'll wrap up for today.
I was wondering, what climates or temperatures can polar bears be in?
Polar bears are really tough. There's a word called a thermoneutral zone, and that means the range of temperatures over which you're basically fairly comfortable. And it's pretty high for humans. It might go from maybe 30 degrees down to about 10 degrees or something, by 10 or 15. But a polar bear can go right down can be comfortable when it's 20 degrees. It can be comfortable when it's gone down to 40, minus 40 or 45 degrees. And similarly, Arctic foxes, they're so highly adapted to life in the cold weather that their thermoneutral zone is very wide, and it takes them to much colder weather than we could even dream about.
All right. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, I see that you've managed to join us again. Sunniva, do you want to try and finish that story quickly about the polar bear?
Yeah, sorry about that. We just have really unstable satellite. Yeah, so you got the part where I walked outside and I turned the light on, and apparently I scared the polar bear. He came from my right side, which is where Etida sleeps at night, our dog, and he went right in front of me, was literally 2 meters in front of me, and then he ran off down towards the water line, and then he ran south. And then I yelled Hilde's name because in that moment I'm feeling like this is not really happening. Did I just see a polar bear 6 feet, 2 meters away from me? Really quite overwhelming, and also just a beautiful experience to have because they are absolutely enormous, beautiful marine mammals.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to give a big shout out to our YouTube classrooms who joined us. Thank you for sending in the awesome questions and spending some time with us. Obviously, a huge shout out to all the classrooms who joined us live on camera today. Thank you for joining us and your awesome questions. Ian, thank you for your expertise and sharing your amazing experiences you've had working with polar bears throughout the years and the science that you're doing. And Hilde and Sunniva, thank you for joining us for another awesome event. And we look forward to catching up with the two of you again in December.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Joe. Thanks. Don't forget to stay curious out there and stay engaged.
All right. Let's turn the microphones on, boys and girls. Let's get nice and loud. A big goodbye and thank you all the way to Svalbard. All right. Awesome work, classrooms. You're so good at that. Thank you so much. Ian, again, thank you so much for being with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hilde and Sunniva, stay safe, and we look forward to some more stories.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody.